Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. You are watching your operational briefing for April 5, 2026, and the headline today belongs to Zaporizhzhia. Russian forces have broken through on a 13-kilometer-wide front west of Zaliznichne and are now fighting for Huliapilske, a heavily fortified strongpoint 12 kilometers from Huliapol city. 16 square kilometers taken. If this holds, the approach to Orikhiv from the east takes on a very different shape. Elsewhere, Kostiantynivka's industrial zone is more than half under Russian control, and we will explain why that single fact may determine the fate of the entire city. Lyman continues its slow grind. Novyi Donbass has been cleared. And on the Kupiansk direction, a premature flag-raising in Kovsharivka ended in an ambush, a reminder of what happens when reports outrun reality on the ground. Let us get into it. Over the past 24 hours, the front line has generally retained its positional character, but changes have been recorded on several sectors, some of which are significant in nature. The most important event of the day is the breakthrough on the Zaporizhzhia direction in the Huliapilske area. Simultaneously, data is arriving of Ukrainian tactical successes on isolated sectors, primarily in Kupiansk and Novoyakivlivka. The day's picture is uneven, and an accurate assessment of a number of positions is complicated by the contradictory nature of incoming data. The Middle East, Trump's ultimatum. Running in parallel with frontline events, a critical diplomatic situation is unfolding in the Middle East that directly affects the global context of the conflict. The US president issued Iran a 48-hour ultimatum demanding the unblocking of the Strait of Hormuz, threatening, in the event of non-compliance, to strike Iranian power plants and bridges. At the time of this briefing, the Iranian side has shown no sign of complying with this demand. A separate episode, the destruction of an American F-15 fighter over Iran on Friday. One pilot was evacuated. The search for the second required the declaration of a dedicated search and rescue operation involving a helicopter group, which was subsequently also destroyed. The war in the Middle East is entering its second month, without decisive results for the American side. The operational significance of this context for the Ukrainian theater is clear. In the event of a US transition to a ground operation in Iran, the flow of weapons currently directed toward Ukraine will inevitably be redistributed. Zaporizhzhia direction. Breakthrough at Huliapilske. The most significant event of the day occurred on the Zaporizhzhia direction. Russian forces broke through the defensive line west of Zaliznichne on a sector approximately 13 kilometers wide and advanced to Huliapilske. Active fighting for this settlement is currently underway. The area of territory taken amounts to approximately 16 square kilometers. The operational significance of this advance is determined by several factors. Huliapilske is a major fortified strongpoint of Ukrainian forces located approximately 12 kilometers from Huliapol city. Taking it under control will substantially close the distance to the city itself and create a threat of envelopment of the Orikhiv grouping. Beyond the advance toward Huliapilske directly, Russian forces succeeded in expanding their zone of control along the Zherebets River and along the important Orikhiv, Huliapol highway, as well as expanding the zone of control north of Myrn, forming a unified bridgehead west of Huliapol. This sector of the front is one of the most heavily fortified along the entire line of contact. The fortification lines here were constructed on the model of the Surovikin line. The fact that Russian forces are methodically breaching them and advancing toward Orikhiv from the east demonstrates the real pressure that the east grouping is exerting on this direction, despite the Ukrainian counteroffensive of preceding months. That said, negative changes have been recorded on the western flank of the Zaporizhzhia direction. Ukrainian forces advanced 1 kilometer and entered the center of Novoyakivlivka. This settlement has long been a zone of intense confrontation with multiple changes of control. The Ukrainian advance came at a high price, but the fact of entry into the settlement has been recorded. The situation here remains unstable and requires continued monitoring. The status of Boykivka remains undetermined. Several days ago, the Russian side announced the settlement had been taken under control, but subsequently, Ukrainian forces were again recorded inside it. At the time of this briefing, Boykivka is in grey zone status with no established control. Ternivate, meanwhile, remains under full Russian control, No changes on this settlement. Kupiansk direction. A mixed picture. On the Kupiansk direction, both Russian advances and Ukrainian countermeasures were recorded over the past 24 hours. On the positive side for the Russian forces, Russian units succeeded in pushing the front line back from Holubivka by approximately 1.2 to 1.5 kilometers, with a zone of control expansion in the settlement area. Farm structures in the adjacent district are being cleared, and a Ukrainian prisoner of war has been reported. At the same time, in the northern part of Kupiansk itself, Ukrainian forces exploited overcast weather that limited Russian reconnaissance capabilities and conducted a counterattack in the private housing sector. They succeeded in pushing Russian positions back somewhat in this area. This confirms what has been stated in previous briefings. Kupiansk is a zone of active combat contact for both sides, with no established stable control by either. The overall assessment puts the city at roughly a 50-50 split. A significant portion is in grey zone status. The Kovsharivka episode warrants separate attention. Several days ago, the Russian side officially announced the full capture of this settlement. According to data received today, servicemen tasked with entering the settlement and confirming control walked into a Ukrainian ambush. Verified control over Kovsharivka has not been established at this time. Available data indicates only partial presence at best. Novusinov is also in grey zone status without verified control. This episode clearly illustrates the risks of premature official announcements about the capture of settlements, a situation characteristic not only of this direction but of several other front sectors as well. Kramatorsk direction, Privilia. On the Kramatorsk direction, the pro-Ukrainian resource deep state confirmed a Russian advance in the Privilia area amounting to approximately 5 square kilometers. In reality, Privilia passed under Russian control some time ago, and this confirmation simply reflects actual conditions with a delay. Active fighting has already shifted to Dobrova and Fedorivka Druha. That is where the real line of engagement now runs. Russian force presence in Lipivka is being recorded. Fighting for the settlement has continued for several days. The Ukrainian side attempted a counterattack in Nikiforivka, but without result. Kostiantynivka direction, the industrial zone, the critical moment. On the Kostiantynivka direction, intense fighting continues both inside the city and on its approaches. Over half of the Megatex industrial zone in the city's central district has passed under Russian control. This is a decisive moment for understanding the fate of the entire city. The industrial zone is located effectively at its center and serves as the primary anchor for the entire Ukrainian defensive posture. Its loss calls into question the ability of the Ukrainian garrison to hold the multi-story residential districts. With the loss of the industrial zone, the defense risks collapsing considerably faster. Simultaneously, Russian units are attempting to filter through the industrial zone to cut off part of Kostiantynivka, and are also advancing from Ilyanivka toward the western multi-story residential districts of the city and from the direction of Berostok. An entry onto Lomonosova Avenue has also been recorded. The Ukrainian side is transferring reserves, but the scale of simultaneous pressure from multiple directions substantially limits its ability to stabilize the situation. Lyman direction. On the Lyman direction, fighting continues without new confirmed cartographic changes over the past 24 hours. Russian forces continue a gradual advance through the private housing sector from the south and east. Lyman is almost entirely composed of private residential construction, much of which has been heavily damaged in the course of prolonged fighting, making defense progressively more difficult. The sky over the city is filled with fiber optic filaments from drones on both sides, an illustration of the intensity of UAV application on this direction. The operational significance of Lyman remains unchanged. Its fall will open a flanking bypass of Sloviansk and threaten the single supply road to the city. The resolution here is, by available assessments, a matter of the coming weeks. Dobropillia direction, Novyi Donbass and Belitske. On the Dobropillia direction, 2 confirmed changes have been recorded. Ukrainian forces have been fully expelled from Novyi Donbass. Final clearing of the settlement is currently underway. This is a significant result, as Novyi Donbass together with Belitske constitute key strongpoints protecting Dobropillia from the east. The second, control has been restored over the eastern and southeastern part of Belitske, where Ukrainian forces had previously established a foothold. The scale of this object is worth noting. Belitske is a full city with a pre-war population of approximately 10,000 people, not a small settlement. On the approaches to Dobropillia, Ukrainian forces continue counterattack attempts in the Kherson area, as well as northward from the direction of Shevchenko and Serhivka toward the western outskirts of Pokrovsk. These attempts have so far produced no results. On the Druzhkivka direction, a foothold has been established on the southern outskirts of Dobropillia. Dobropillia is a serious Ukrainian strongpoint, located on elevated ground with observation and fire correction capabilities. Taking it under control will carry tactical significance for further advance in this sector. Kherson direction, situation in the city. On the Kherson direction, the head of the Kherson Regional Administration made a statement regarding the active work of underground structures inside Kherson itself, which is gradually degrading the combat capability of the Ukrainian garrison. In parallel, logistics along the M14 highway from Mykolaiv and from the direction of Kryvyi Rih are being systematically disrupted through the use of strike UAVs and Lancet munitions, preventing the timely delivery of reinforcements, ammunition and supplies. Whether this represents preparation for active combat operations directly for the city is difficult to assess at this stage. The situation requires continued monitoring. On the Dnipropetrovsk direction, no changes along the line of contact. An aviation strike against Mazheva, an important logistics hub for Ukrainian forces through which railway supply routes for this sector pass, has been recorded. April 5th presents an uneven picture combining real operational successes with tactical setbacks and zones of uncertainty. The main event of the day, the breakthrough in the Lyman area, is the most significant single operational result on the Zaporizhzhia direction in recent weeks. If the fighting for Lyman concludes with the settlement passing under control, this will substantially alter the front configuration in this sector and accelerate the advance toward Orikhiv. At the same time, a number of situations require measured assessment. The status of Kovsharivka, Novusinov, and Boykivka remains verifiably ambiguous. Attempts to confirm control over settlements without sufficient evidentiary basis lead to tactical losses, as demonstrated by today's Kovsharivka episode. Kupiansk remains a city with a blurred front line and presence by both sides. The overall vector of the day, broad sector pressure with a limited number of confirmed cartographic changes. The situation continues to develop. Briefing compiled as of April 5, 2026. Data on Lyman, Boykivka, Kovsharivka, and Lyman requires clarification as confirming materials continue to arrive.